Hello again, everybody, and welcome to my newest art video. This one was the first video I used in upward angle and overhead angle, so this should be a fun experiment for everyone. Hopefully an easier angle to see the drawing process from. I'd say the first 1 minute and 45 seconds of this video are even more sped up than normal because it's all masking fluid work, and that's always tough to see on camera, all that masking fluid work. But today we are drawing an overhead ocean view, so I suppose that it is pretty appropriate that this is my first overhead video because it's an overhead drawing, so I guess that works out well. And it's an overhead view of the Atlantic side of Florida off the coast in some very shallow waters where some black-tipped reef sharks gathered together. This was actually based off of some footage that I saw on a video by Johnathan Bird's Blue World. It was gorgeous video footage. I suggest you all go and check out that video because it is truly a stunning video. I'll put a link in the description, so please check down below on your way to subscribing, maybe. Check down below and you'll see that link. But anyway, I was really inspired by that video. It was so beautiful. I plan on moving down to Florida at the end of this year, so it touched me, I guess, even more than normal because I've been looking at all sorts of Florida stuff. Here I am starting the actual painting now that the masking fluid is all finished. You can see my head right there. I'm not quite used to this overhead angle yet, so please excuse my random head shots. And you see that nice purple streak? Yeah, I did that on accident. I spilled some ink. On my paper before I even started. And that's another lesson, I guess, in the permanence of ink. That didn't go away. I tried and it did not go away, but that's okay. It got covered up. It got covered up by this water here. See, this is where I'm starting my actual water drawing, and the first thing I'm mapping out are my deepest areas, my darkest areas of the water. I don't have much opportunity to observe water, which it's one of the reasons I plan on moving to the coast, honestly. I'd love the chance to observe water more often. One of the things that I felt by the end of this piece was that my surf painting looked a little too stiff, inorganic. I really am excited to get the experience of observing water a little bit more, and I hope it'll improve my paintings in the long run, but here I am doing my best. I think this might be my second or third attempt at water. My first one in ink, though. I've never done water in ink, and that was its own special challenge because of how ink doesn't want to move as easily as something like watercolor. Oh, now we're starting the base layer for our sand. I'm starting this piece by just making a nice even base layer in the general colors I want it to look, mapping out where the darker areas are and where the lighter areas are. There I am putting some sand tone underneath. I think it was the first quarter, maybe the first half in this depth here of my water. I added some sand colors to the blue because you can see the sand through the water because it's so shallow. I think going back, maybe I would have started with some sand color on the bottom for accuracy before adding the blue, but I like how this turned out, so it was an alright attempt anyway. In the shallowest parts of the water, you can always see the sand through the water itself, so you've got to make sure to represent that in your drawing. It's just another little detail. Always pay attention to your little details. It's always my biggest tip. And now I'm just going in and I'm adding some more depth to the dark areas of my water. I sort of struggle with representing water sometimes. It's one of my weaker points. It's something that I aim to work on in the coming year. Oh, the light changed. The sun must have set, you guys. Sorry about that light change. This is some more masking fluid. I just put in, I think, a couple of reflection lines that I wanted to be this lighter blue, but not necessarily stark white. I went in with that masking fluid initially when I was doing the surf and put in some reflection lines that I wanted to be completely white, but I waited until after I'd put in some blue to add a few more bits of masking fluid so that I could add some lighter blue highlights as well, add some tone variance to the highlight as well. You don't want your highlights aren't always going to be a plain white. You know, sometimes they're light gray, sometimes they're light blue. It depends on what you're looking at, and your observational skills are really what's going to separate. It's really what's going to advance your art to the next level is honing those observational skills, really. That's why I want to observe the ocean. I live right in the middle of the country, practically right in the middle, equidistant from either coast. So this is my dream of water, I suppose, more than anything. We'll see how that goes. Maybe you guys will follow along with me when I move to the coast, and you can see how my water paintings improve, or not, I suppose. But you know, with practice, I think anything improves. Practice and observation. There's my watercolor brushes. They're watercolor brushes, but I use them for alcohol ink. Oh, not alcohol ink, I suppose. This would be India ink, colored India ink. That's correct, I think. But you gotta be extra careful with ink in your paintbrushes. This is something that I discovered. Ink will dry in your paintbrush and then just ruin the bristles. In case you didn't notice, I am just right now, I said that when you paint like this with the inks, as you can see that I'm doing, I try and build up my layers really slowly. I'm extra cautious with ink because of how permanent they are once they dry. So I build it up in really slow, really diluted layers to get the depth of the effect that I want. So as I'm talking here, just remember I'm continuing to go through and add darks where I see darker parts of the water, and all the while trying to paint around where I see the lightest parts of the water to let that lighter blue show through. But, oh yeah, the inks in the paintbrush. You gotta watch that your inks don't dry in your paintbrush or it will completely ruin them. And normally I wouldn't recommend that you leave a brush in your water for too long. But in this case I did end up leaving because it's bad for that metal clampy bit that holds the bristles to the stick of the paintbrush. I really got to look up more paintbrush anatomy. Ferrule? I think it might be called a ferrule with that metal bit, but I'll have to look it up. If you know, educate me in the comments, please. I'm always excited to learn. But normally I wouldn't recommend putting the brush in the water and leaving it there very long because it will damage your paintbrush. But with the ink, sorry, I keep saying alcohol ink, but that's incorrect. It's India ink. But with any sort of ink, really, I prefer to keep my brush in the water when I'm not using it because it'll keep the ink from drying on the brush. Or, you know, I suppose I could rinse it off and then set it aside, but I guess I'm just a little too lazy. I'll work on that this year. Brush habits. Better brush habits. My paintbrushes go through a lot. They take a lot of abuse. Here I am. You can start finally seeing some depth really come up in this water here. You can see the high points of the waves and the low points between the waves. This is from quite a distance up, so it looks a little different than what you would see at the surface area of the water. There's a lot more general trends of up and down troughs, peaks and valleys. Than you would see closer up, where you would see all of those tiny individual waves. What you're seeing from so high up like this is really the waves created by all of the tiny individual waves, more than more than any little pieces themselves. And now I'm trying to highlight, trying to put some color in this surf here because my surf was looking a little flat and I needed some more color variance. There's going to be dips and divots along the coast, tide pools, things like that where water collects more deeply. You've got to add a lot of variance, I've found, with water, a lot of natural randomness. My biggest fault, my biggest challenge, I suppose, is to not be too uniform in my application of any particular element in nature. I tend to get too uniform, and you've got to really randomize it a little bit and be more comfortable with just randomizing, or else it's going to look even more stiff than this one ended up looking, I think, in the end. And now I'm doing the same thing to the sand that I did with the water. It's really the exact same techniques except with a different color. I'm adding some darks where I see the darkest, and I'm painting around my highlights to keep them nice and bright. And I'm adding a lot of darker colors to the edge of the surf where the water hits the sand, because there's always a little bit of a shadow. It's how your waves look a little more three-dimensional, is you have to remember to add that shadow underneath the wave. So now my sand's shaping up a little bit, and I go back to fiddle with the water. Water like this, I've found, takes a lot of patient fiddling. You've really got to build it up slowly and in layers, or at least I do. I'm sure some people can just draw it out super quick, but well, this is my style, I suppose. Adding in some brighter blues where I wanted those highlights to really contrast. In order for a highlight to really stand out, you have to have a darker tone next to it. You have to, or else your highlight will get lost in the rest of the painting. So you have to not be afraid to just continue adding darks next to your highlight to make them look really nice. Now this is so cool because it looks like this is actually watercolor paper here. You can see in my materials list below what the watercolor paper brand is, but this is a watercolor paper, so unlike some of my previous videos where I used mixed media paper, this paper is not actually crinkling and wrinkling as I paint on it, like a thinner paper would buckle and crinkle. But because of the way I'm painting these waves and because of the way that I'm keeping these highlights really bright, it looks like the paper has crinkled. It's kind of a cool effect. It's one of my favorite illusions, that dip and ridge kind of look. It makes it look like the paper has crinkled up. I don't know, it's just cool. What am I doing now? Fiddling. Oh, now it's splatters. Splatters are going in there now. I decided that my whole thing was looking a little too untextured, I guess. From so high up, it's not going to appear very textured. You're not going to see a lot of the textural details of the landscape, but I really wanted the sense of texture in my beach for the sand and in my water for just the movement of the water. So in certain points throughout this painting, I would get a little bit of a darker color or a little bit of a brighter color of each for the blue for the water, obviously, and more of the tan for the beach. And I would just splatter little bits of these random different colors in little splatters all over the place. And I think that added to the texture of the finished piece. Oh, there's my little sharks from above. Those were my practice sharks. I decided, since I had never really painted a shark, I hadn't painted any sharks before this point, I really wanted to see what the effect was going to look like before I actually started on my piece. I wanted to see how much color I would need, if you'd see the blue through the shark. I wanted the sharks to look a little blue because you're seeing them through the water, you know. I didn't want them to be too stark against the water, like they were floating on top. I wanted them to look like they were in the water. So I did some practice sharks, and I always recommend doing a little practice something on a scrap piece of paper if you're not quite sure what you're doing. It's better to mess up your scratch paper if you can't figure out what you want to do right away than it is to mess up the piece that you've been working on. So always keep spare paper handy to practice. And I'm starting these little sharks by just outlining the shape of them in a very, very light gray, because you have to get the shape kind of exactly right for it to look like a shark. It could be any sort of fish underneath there. You have to make sure that it looks like a shark, or else it won't, I guess. No one will know. It's like, what is that crazy school of fish in your painting? It's like, no, it's a group of sharks. It's not fish. So yeah, be careful. Check your outlines. Make sure it looks like what you want it to look. That sounds pretty obvious, but I think a lot of people resign themselves to an imperfect shape and just keep barreling forward, and that's not really the way to go. You really should practice your shape a couple of times and make sure it looks how you want it to look. That's really important, especially for a silhouette like this, something that's like a silhouette. Your silhouette needs to be recognizable, or the point of your picture won't be brought across, I suppose. So I'm starting with my nice light gray outline, and then after I've got that shape down right, see, I'm starting to draw them in darker now as I get more confident with my shape practice here. And then I go in with an extra dark bit of ink, some straight black, and I add in some shadows and the little black tips. The black-tipped reef sharks, as per their name, have these lovely black tips on their dorsal fins, and I think on their tail as well, and maybe on their top fin too. Oh, I suppose their top fin is a dorsal fin. Silly me. I suppose it'd be more of a pectoral fin that I was talking about before. But mostly that's what you see from this drawing is the black tip on the pectoral fin. You can't really see that top fin from this perspective. Oh, that color looks interesting right there. I must have been using a lamp again. My lamp at this time had a very yellow light bulb, and it messes with my color sometimes. I tried not to stress, I guess, too much over these sharks because I wanted them to look sort of indefinite, because they're from such a distance, you're so far above the sharks at this perspective that you wouldn't see them that well anyways. So I tried not to be too detail oriented about the sharks. It goes against my general nature though, but it ended up all right. So I suppose it worked out. I love that purple color though. I think I might have to draw like a purpley blue ocean just to replicate that, even though that's just a lighting error at this point. I do like that purple. It's pretty. Sorry for my head again. There, my head's all over the place, getting up in your business in the camera lens. Oh, off camera there. Oh, there we go. Back that up so you can see. See, now that I've let my first very light layer of gray dry, that's when I'm going in with this darker color here and adding in some details. I'm adding in some shading on one side of a lot of the sharks to indicate motion. I'm adding in a little bit of the tips, a little bit of the black tips. It's strange when your random smudges of ink start to look like what you actually want it to look like. It's very strange, but rewarding as well. And that's my white ink. The white ink is very subtle. You can see it. I'll have a very close-up shot of the picture at the very end here. You'll be able to see. But the white ink is very subtle. I was just adding sort of a brighter spot right at the top middle of the shark to sort of represent the fin of the shark, because it would be closer to the light than the rest of the shark, obviously, as it sticks up straight out the back there. So that's a very subtle little detail, but I think it really added to, I guess, the sharkiness of my silhouettes. Oh, there's those black tips. Honestly, those tiny spots of black on the tips of my little shark fins there were, I think, my favorite thing to do. Just because it was so easy and it added such a dramatic impact to the outline of the shark, you know, the little black tips. It definitely added to the sharkiness, the general sharkiness of the drawing here. Oh, that's a bit blurry. What happened there, automatic focus? You are not living up to your name, I think, but I think it's because it's so close. Oh, Archie, that's my puppy Archie. He's a little whiny today because he wants to go outside. So excuse me just for a moment, everyone, and I will let this silly dog outside and be right back. And I'm back. Did you miss me? Of course you didn't, because with the power of editing, you didn't have to wait at all for me to get back. What am I doing here? I don't know what I'm doing with my finger. Oh, I'm taking off my masking fluid now. Taking off my masking fluid that blocked out all of those highlights in the surf and on the surface of the water. Honestly, I could have used some more uniform highlights. I guess it's alright that it's so random. I would have liked some more light reflection waters over top of my shark. Maybe I'll try that when I'm experimenting with watercolors. I want to draw something similar to this with the sharks and the water in watercolor because I think it would be easier for water. I suppose that makes sense, I guess. If it's watercolor, maybe it's easier to draw water. That would be funny. Oh, now I'm adding the importance, very small detail, but also very important. I'm adding a little shadow underneath each of my sharks. Because in the shallow waters, you have the ground and then the shark very close together in this very shallow portion of ocean. So you'll see the shadow of the shark reflected on the ocean floor there. Just a little detail, but it really adds dimensionality to the sharks. Now I'm taking off my masking fluid here on the beach here. It's a little off camera, so I think I'm gonna maybe skip this part in the video. There we go, all moved over. Now here is where I started running into some more, I guess, not necessarily problems, challenges, I suppose. I wasn't as careful as I should have been with the masking fluid, I think. It didn't give me exactly the effect that I wanted, but it gave me a decent effect. Just adding in some more blues, unifying that ocean water a little bit more. But you can start to see here, now that I've taken this masking fluid on, what exactly I meant by how stiff the surf looks. You know, that's something I definitely want to work on this year. Here I am with my flicking brush. I think it used to be a makeup brush. I'm not sure, but it's one of my flicking brushes now, where I put on a little bit of lightly watered down paints and then use my finger to pull back the bristles and spatter little bits of paint on there. I'm adding some fluffiness to my surf. That was one of the things I was able to do to this masking fluid surf that I liked a little better. I was able to use my flicking brush and add in some surf texture, I guess, some like white stippling, a little bit of white stippling around the edges there. Gave it a little bit of a fluffier look to the white. I think that was the problem with this masking fluid surf. It was too stark. And now I'm just going in and working with these dark tones on my beach again. I'm just trying to keep the darks looking dark and the highlights looking bright. If your highlight isn't looking bright enough, then the only thing you can really do is add in some more darks next to the highlight to make it stand out more. And that's what I do here and there on the beach. The beach and the water, it's so interesting how similar they were to paint, the sand and the water. And I suppose that's because they influence each other so closely. You know, the water washes over the sand and creates a very similar texture to the water itself. So it was fun. It was an interesting experience. And here it is, like I said, looking a little stiff, but altogether I was pleased with it. I really like the angle. I really enjoy odd angles in my drawings, and this overhead view just really captured my imagination. And once again, really shout out to Johnathan Bird's Blue World. His video was gorgeous and inspiring, and the people that recorded it are amazing people, and the work they do with sharks is necessary and interesting. I definitely suggest you take a look. I have, again, that link in the description down below if you are interested. And I'm adding in my framing device. I haven't decided if I completely like this yet. I add this white border around my pieces, and then I put in this black line just a little bit away from the edge. I think it gives it a nice looking effect, but I'm not sure, not 100% sure yet if I'm gonna keep doing that. And there it is, my finished overhead shark drawing. It's pretty cool. I like it quite a lot. It was an interesting opportunity to practice my water some more and find out some challenges that go along with painting water like this in the colored India inks. But overall, it was a great video. I liked the overhead angle, and I hope you liked it too. If you did like it, you can go ahead and maybe subscribe or like my video, even share it with your friends. Anything you could do is super helpful to me, and I appreciate it. Thank you for following along with this video today, and I hope to see you in my next video. Goodbye. Goodbye.